it is a pleasure being with you today, and you're right. Not so long ago, it must have been about 6 weeks ago, I did give a speech at the Council of Foreign Relations, which I understand is a sister company or sister institution. Both of you, I think, have as a common goal to foster ideas and dialogue to make sure that we have a more prosperous and a more secure world. And those are excellent goals and objectives which are not vastly different from the goals and the objectives of the IMF, which has to do with stability in the global economy. Now, needless to say that we have a lot to do at the moment, and I'm delighted to actually be in Europe and to address your group. This is my first occasion to speak on a European panel and on a European scene. Now, the key messages that I would like to convey to you is that at this stage, and given the economic circumstances that we are facing, countries and policymakers in those countries around the world must act now, must act boldly, and must act together. That is certainly the view of the Fund. The world is collectively suffering from a crisis of confidence in the face of deteriorating economic outlook and rising concern about the health of sovereigns and banks. All this is happening at a time when the scope for policy action is considerably narrower than what it was 2, say 3 years ago, right after the financial crisis. But it is not to say that there are no policy options. There are fewer policy options. But there is a path for recovery, and that is certainly what the Fund is seeing. Let us look at the challenges for the global economy. The bottom line is that global activity has slowed and downside risks have increased. And at the same time, the global rebalancing demand that we were all expecting for sustainable growth to take place has stalled. If we look at the key advanced economies, the necessary and expected handover from the public funding necessary post-crisis to the private sector is not taking place, or if it is taking place at a much slower pace than expected. And the fundamental problem is that weak growth and weak balance sheets, be that of government, of banks, of households, are feeding negatively on each other. And if growth continues to lose momentum, balance sheets problem will worsen, fiscal sustainability will be threatened, and the scope for policies to salvage the economy will disappear. If we look now at the emerging economies, where we all thought that salvation would come from, well, certainly their performance has been considerably better. But in some countries, growth may be too fast, and policies are needed to contain overheating risks, and that of inflation in particular. In addition, in many of the key surplus countries, there has been little progress in shifting from external to domestic demand. And in these economies, significant currency appreciation and/or structural reforms can help bring about the rebalancing needed to support growth that is sustainable, strong, and stable. It is not happening fast enough. Now, the picture that I've painted, going from the advanced to the emerging economies, is clearly not a rosy one. But as I said, there are policy options to actually support the recovery. The key, however, and it's a difficult act. I've been in government, I know how complicated it is. The difficult act is that policymakers must have the conviction and understand and communicate the urgency of tackling today's challenges, while at the same time be nimble should circumstances change. That's a bit of a balancing act when it comes to governments. Now, I said at the beginning that it was time to act now. And I will, look at especially the advanced economies and identify both the fiscal and the monetary policies that can be taken. For the advanced economies, there is no question that fiscal sustainability must be restored through credible, implementable consolidation plans. But we also know, and I have said it, that consolidation, if it happens too quickly will hurt the recovery and worsen job prospects. So the challenge, yet again, the balance, is to actually find the right pace for adjustment. Neither too fast, nor too slow. Now, once I've said that, I haven't said anything. Because it will have to be country-specific. It is not a general principle that applies across the board. It has to apply country by country and depending on the circumstances of that country. Those countries that are facing considerable market pressure, as we have seen, or that could face considerable market pressure in the absence of an upfront adjustment, must press ahead with fiscal consolidation, and they must do so now. But in other countries, there is scope for a slower pace of consolidation, combined with policies to support growth. The key, again, is to clarify a credible, implementable, medium-term strategy to first stabilize and then lower the debt-to-GDP ratio. Within this strategy, fiscal measures that reliably deliver savings tomorrow on a consistent, on a recurrent basis will help create space for supporting growth today by permitting a slower pace of consolidation. So in a nutshell, consolidation is a must. But the question will have to be decided for each country specifically, one country at a time, depending on its circumstances, as to what pace it should take. This is as far as fiscal policy is concerned. If we look at monetary policy now, monetary policy has a role to play in advanced economies. Broadly speaking, it should remain highly accommodative because the risk of recession outweigh the risk of inflation. Now, one might say, well, wait a minute. Inflation is relatively high compared with objectives. Well, we have to dissecate inflation and see exactly what is core inflation from what is very conjunctural causes of inflation. And we at the Fund see that the inflation expectations is well anchored and relatively low compared with objectives, whereas commodity prices that fueled inflation are now abating. So policymakers, particularly in the monetary sphere, should stand ready as needed to take more action to support the recovery, including through unconventional measures. Now, I'm going to turn very quickly, and it's broad brush, clearly, to the United States, to the Eurozone, and indeed to the United Kingdom, with all due respect, because you all know a lot more than I do about this economy. If we look at the United States, the recent economic performance has been disappointing, and the downside risks to growth have increased. They have been increased as a result of the political circumstances that we have all witnessed in the summer. It's been more difficult, clearly. Credible decisions on fiscal consolidations involving reforming future entitlement spending, and here clearly we have in mind pension schemes, social security benefit programs, and the rest of them, but also other revenue and expenditure measures would create some space for policies that support growth and jobs today. I don't know what you were doing last night, but certainly suffering from a bit of jet lag, I did watch the speech of President Obama at Congress. And certainly we welcome the proposals announced by President